My name's Charles Feldmann. I run an international law firm based out of Denver, Colorado. I like to say I began my cannabis career about 25 years ago. I was a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor in California. Went on to be a state narcotics prosecutor, ultimately ended up running a DEA drug task force. Thank you. Thank you. Keep it, please. Tell me how you really feel. Today, I'm proud to say our law firm actually now is on the other side of this magnificent social experiment. Thank you. So we get to work with a lot of clients across the world who are trying to figure out the right way to navigate this giant social experiment that we're getting to go through. And my journey started with in the 90s on the war on drugs. I came out of the Marine Corps. I was very much a true believer in that war. I was very good at it, unfortunately. And progressing now to the other side, I see the real value in helping business and clients who are about the medicine, which is here what we're talking about. Really seeing the medicinal side to this plant, something that's been prescribed for 3,000 years, and really getting to help in the value of that. So it's been an emotional journey for me to go from one end of the spectrum to the other. I'll let Matt share his own personal journey. Find me afterwards. I'd love to tell you more about what that's entailed and what I've learned from that experience. And now as lawyers, how we get to help true legitimate businesses navigate their way through international treaties, states, federal laws, various other regulatory bodies. So, Matt.
Thanks, Charles. My background and experiences aren't all that dissimilar from Charles. Started my career in the mid-'80s, and back at that time, it was cocaine from Colombia through Bahamas and into South Florida. If you might remember, those of you old enough, George Bush's South Florida task force, the war on drugs, Nancy Reagan, just say no. Those were the days that I started my career, but as my career evolved, prescription drug abuse, misuse and abuse became a front burner issue. I was at the forefront of that about 15 years ago when it was legal to buy Vicodin or hydrocodone online without a prescription. So a kid could go online with a credit card, parents' credit card, grandparents' credit card, and could buy opiates online. Those drugs would then be delivered right to the doorstep by a parcel carrier like FedEx or UPS. Took down a bunch of internet pharmacies down in South Florida or in Florida in general. And based on that, we had legislation passed. It was the Ryan Haight Act legislation that mandated one face-to-face doctor-patient visit before a controlled substance prescription could be written. So with that, there was an advent of pill mills, pain clinics, and doctor on site, lines out the door, security. The reason I tell you this is because this is how I came to where I am today. This is how I became a true believer in medical cannabis and the benefits of medical cannabis, and how I've come to disdain the pharma industry, especially companies like Purdue Pharma. And I would encourage you to read a complaint from the state of Massachusetts, where I'm from, against Purdue Pharma. As you may or may not know, in the U.S., many of the states are suing the pharma industry because they want to recoup the healthcare costs from the opioid epidemic. It costs millions of dollars to treat people, and that's only the half of it. So many folks have died, children have died, friends of my children, children of my friends have died. Anybody in the U.S. knows somebody who's been affected by the opioid epidemic. So, as I was on the forefront, taking down criminal organizations that were involved in the illicit distribution of prescription drugs, it became apparent to me that a lot of these companies were basically drug cartels in suits. And I also realized that through my education and evolution in medical cannabis space with Chiron Life Sciences, that nobody's ever died of a cannabis overdose. So I'm a firm believer in cannabis, medical cannabis as a treatment, and if the research that's been undertaken proves to be true and we can treat people with pain, as my colleagues here this morning, Dr. Maria Abadola and Dr. Jairo Espinoza have stated. If we can do that, I'm all for it. My role with Chiron is to keep the company in compliance. I have quite a bit of history with that. And what we're doing is we're taking the DEA regulations that DEA enforces on the pharmaceutical industry to the cannabis space. So if it works well in the most highly regulated industry in the world, I think it could work well for cannabis. So that's what we're doing at Chiron, and that's what we're going to take to all of Latin America and hopefully the U.S. And when legalization occurs in the U.S., at least for medical cannabis, we're going to be right there on top of the regulations because we know how to regulate the industry, and it's working well for us in Colombia right now. So thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to say something about CannaTech. The milestone, I hope you realize, the milestone to have 2 former members of the DEA speaking at a medical cannabis conference in Panama is significant. That is a lot of social change, so well done. I don't know anywhere in the world where that's actually happening, so kudos to that team. Matt and I decided we could talk all day long about probably stuff you don't even care about. So we thought maybe it would be more interesting if you guys had some questions and would like us to talk about questions. We can certainly just ramble on. I'm a lawyer by trade, so I'm well trained at it. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Banking regulations, we know when that's going to happen. We're having a lot of problems bringing in money from countries like Colombia. And so I know we're trying to get stuff in from Canada. We can't take it out of the U.S. A lot of investors out of the U.S. right now. So we know it's all So the question is banking regulations, and when are those funds from the U.S. going to be able to be accepted in the international marketplace?
Banking regulations, great question. It will happen in 3 days and 12 hours. Kidding. I think that's most likely has the best shot of actually changing this year. So I'm not a big proponent of federal legalization in the United States really anytime soon, but I think there's a potential to deal with some of the 280 tax-related issues in the U.S. and banking. So we work a lot with clients who are either trying to just set up a bank account in the U.S., set up a corporation, just simple steps. And unfortunately, the U.S. is not a very foreign-friendly country right now, if you read the headlines. And a lot of that comes from Patriot Act, terrorism that they're trying to guard. It's not cannabis related, but it affects this industry enormously. So I would keep a big watch out for this year. Unfortunately, the U.S. Congress is not very effective. They're not really pushing to get anything done. So it may be a very tough year for the U.S. cannabis evolution.
And in furtherance of that, our topic today is the cost of illegality, and that could very well be synonymous with the cost of noncompliance. And if you're not in compliance with the laws and regulations, obviously being a Schedule I drug in the U.S., that makes things very cumbersome with banking, interstate commerce. And of course, every state has been set up differently in the U.S. that has passed legalization, and how they enforce the regulations, which department in that state enforces the regulations. It just makes it so cumbersome to navigate that it's very important and incumbent that you know and get to learn real well the rules and regulations in the geographic region or state in the U.S. where you operate, so that you could stay in compliance. Because if you're not in compliance, you're just giving the government, whether it's state or federal, just every opportunity to put you out of business. So it's important.
Yeah, well, I'm an international company, so I don't operate in the United States of America, but for instance, parent company in the NYSE has to set up a sister company, a vehicle in Canada they'll send monies through Canada and then Canada to here. So we're just waiting to see, when the U.S. banking laws are going to switch this, because I'm sure they're going to be want to take part in this immense industry that's about to blow up in the world?
It's the number one priority of the cannabis industry in America right now, is to change the banking restrictions to actually legitimately be able to bank. So like I said, if there's any hope that anything gets done in the States, it's probably going to be oriented towards banking and taxes. My prediction. Yes, sir.
As a small business owner in California that is an ancillary business to the cannabis industry, I sell greenhouses and a red flag in the banking system, so I cannot get loans for operating a business. Everything has to be either financed in-house or through hard money. Can you explain to everybody here that's not familiar with 280E what it's like to operate a cannabis business in America?
It's easy. It's about a 2% profit margin, according to 280E. So if you don't know, in America we have a statute that came out of the early 80s, 70s, war on drugs, basically where cartels could not take a tax deduction for cost of goods sold. So when you truly apply that to your U.S. tax return, it takes a 40 to 60% profit margin and makes it, if you're really well run, about a 2% profit margin. So my most recent publicized article is kind of a spin off the wine industry. It's, you know, it takes 10 million to make $1 million in the U.S. cannabis industry because it's just so archaic. So that's what I'm talking about. I think there's real hope. I know there's movement in the Trump administration right now to deal with that exact issue. The wild card is Congress. They're just, as you guys all read headlines, it's not a lot getting done.
I have a question. Have you noticed any kind of issues between the legal cannabis for medical uses and the illegal one? I mean, the drug cartels. I mean, how is that impacting really the legalization of the cannabis? Because I'm just wondering, most of the patients are the ones that are driven the doctors to prescribe them the cannabis, but I mean, obviously before that, even in the U.S., you could get that illegally. So I'm just wondering if there is any kind of issues between the legal marijuana and the illegal one and the drug cartel. How is that happening? Because I'm sure if these people start losing money, they might start boycotting the legal marijuana. I don't know if it's more like if you have any information about that, or what is your perception?
Well, there are big issues with legal versus illegal cannabis because the tax burdens are so high on legal cannabis in most states that it's cheaper to buy it illegally. And of course, I'm not sure if you're referring to what's happening in the U.S. or not, but as a frame of reference, being a U.S. citizen, I'm familiar with how that works and how people would rather save money and buy something that's not legal rather than legal if they have to pay a whole lot more for it. As far as the drug cartels, I think a previous speaker mentioned that, you know, with Mexico legalizing cannabis, that's going to be it's going to take some of that cartel action out of the picture because it's going to be legal. So why sell something that's illegal when people are going to be able to buy it legally? So I think that's going to probably help matters on the border as far as cannabis. But you know, there's a lot of other drugs that come over the border, and fentanyl-laced heroin is a huge issue right now. And you know, those distribution routes are in place, whether it's cocaine, cannabis, or fentanyl-laced heroin. It's there, and it's going to be there, but it is an issue.
Okay. In those states where it's legal to produce or to consume CBD, is it also legal to import or to export CBD product to those states, including CBD extraction and seeds for hemp, for example?
And I assume you're talking about U.S. states?
U.S. state, of course, yeah.
So it is not legal currently to transport any form of CBD, hemp or marijuana, across state lines. So a lot of people think the Farm Bill passed, great, CBD everywhere, international, import, export. That's not the case. So if it's going to be in a food product, a cosmetic product, a medicinal product, all of those are going to have different federal regulatory agencies that are going to be monitoring that. And it really, the Farm Bill pushed it down to a state by state. So the states now have to implement their CBD programs. So it's changing. There's a lot on the market. There are a lot of people who are doing it. But if you want the black and white sort of FDA, you know, the DEA answer, that's evolving. But right now it's not interstate. It's still within those stupid state silos that we all try to operate in. I can tell you one on the positive side of that, you know, when I started helping cannabis clients 10 years ago, the questions were all related to how do I not go to prison? How do I, you know, I'd like to get into this, but I really don't want to spend time behind bars. And I can tell you those conversations have dissipated now. Now it's really the question of how do I ensure I'm compliant on the Securities and Exchange Commission? How are my offering documents kosher? You know, how is a promissory note a security instrument? So it's far more sophisticated now than where it started. So there's still, like as Matt was saying, there's still significant illegalities or compliance-related issues, but they're different. They're not freedom-related issues. They're far more traditional business entry to barrier type issues.
And that's a great point. And there's so many landmines out there for folks in this industry. I mean, you think about in the U.S. there's HIPAA laws which protect patient data. And I got a random call from a reporter out of Canada actually who asked me, you know, we're hearing and that if a Canadian tries to enter the U.S. and says that they're entering the U.S. because of a cannabis-related business, they can be sent home and not allowed back into the country. And that reporter was asking me, how are we protecting data and patient data and data in general to ensure that Customs or ICE can't look in a computer and find out whether or not you work for a company or not. So there's compliance issues that deal with the whole spectrum of the industry that need to be dealt with, whether it's, you know, data, whether it's compliance, seed to sale serialization, to prevent and detect diversion from taking place. Just in Massachusetts, where I'm from, there's a lab that was throwing excess cannabis in the dumpster out back, and a local Framingham, Mass police officer found that, and there it goes. All the investors, all the money that was put into this operation, all the business is gone. I mean, how can you defend throwing a controlled substance into a dumpster as opposed to doing it the right way and disposing of it the way the regulations mandate? So there are so many pitfalls and so many ways to get in trouble in this industry that, again, you know, best advice I could give is know the laws and the regs where you live and operate and make sure that you're compliant there. And that's a good place to start. And for those international folks that deal with different countries, you can learn the laws and the regulations in the countries you're going to do business with, whether it's banking or whether it's regulatory or whether it's compliance, you know, patient-related, seed to sale, all of it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, a question for Matt regarding your experience with Chiron in Colombia. What's your take on the cannabis legislation in Colombia in terms of compliance? Do you think we're well built? Are we lacking a lot of things in terms from a DA perspective? And in that sense, would you be a proponent of having a really hard line for non-compliance to lose their license? Or since we're building the industry, should we have a little leeway and understand regulations?
First of all, in Colombia, Chiron, you know, our mandate is, you know, we're 3 levels above what the regulations mandate, so that we won't have an issue with staying in compliance with the regulations, and that's the way we do it. You know, that's the way I did it in the U.S. farm industry. That's the way we're doing it in the cannabis industry, and both in Colombia and every country we operate from here on out. As far as your question about, well, should the country give a company leeway if they fall out of line or aren't compliant, you know, that's a pretty broad, wide-ranging question. I mean, what does that mean? Is it, you know, employee theft? Is it not reporting to the government the way that the regulations mandate? I think every issue has to be taken into consideration based on that issue and that violation. We have a seed to sale closed loop of distribution so that we can track our seed right to sale. And if we do that the way that we do it, we shouldn't have any issues with our compliance. We should be able to show any regulator that comes to our site where any seed, flower, plant is at any time during the manufacturing process. And that will keep us from having issues that will bring adverse actions to our license or fines or whatnot. So I think that, I think the country's done a great job with the regulations. I think they're good regulations, and I think that as we move forward, there are going to be issues, people are going to have problems, and I think it's a one-on-one kind of penalty or adverse action.
Thank you, Matt and Charles.
If you want our real DEA inside stories, we'll be at the bar all afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us.